in which our lovers begin to learn the consequences of their actions. Chapter 12. The load was tied down. Yvonne jumped off and led the fine, well-fed horse by the bridle. The woman threw the rake up onto the load and went with a brisk step, swinging her arms, to join the women gathered in a circle. Yvonne drove out to the road and joined the line of other carts. The women, with rakes on their shoulders, bright colors flashing, chattering and ringing merry voices, walked behind the carts. One coarse, wild female voice struck up a song and sang till the refrain, and then all at once, with one accord, the same song was taken up from the beginning by some 50 different coarse, high, healthy voices. The singing women approached Levine, and it seemed to him that a thundercloud of merriment was coming upon him. The cloud came over him and enveloped him and the haystack on which he lay, and all the other haystacks and carts, and the whole meadow with the distant fields, all started moving and heaving to the rhythm of this wild, rollicking song, with its shouts, whistles, and whoops. Levine was envious of this healthy merriment. He would have liked to take part in expressing this joy of life, but he could do nothing, and had to lie there and look and listen. When the peasants and their song had vanished from his sight and hearing, a heavy feeling of anguish at his loneliness, his bodily idleness, his hostility to this world, came over him. Some of those same moujiks who had argued most of all with him over the hay, whom he had offended, or who had wanted to cheat him, those same moujiks greeted him cheerfully and obviously did not and could not have any malice towards him, nor any repentance or even memory of having wanted to cheat him. It was all drowned in the sea of cheerful common labor. God had given the day. God had given the strength. Both day and strength had been devoted to labor, and in that lay the reward. And whom was this labor for? What would its fruits be? These considerations were irrelevant and insignificant. Levine had often admired this life, had often experienced a feeling of envy for the people who lived this life. But that day, for the first time, especially under the impression of what he had seen in the relations of Ivan Parmenov and his young wife, the thought came clearly to Levine that it was up to him to change that so burdensome, idle, artificial, and individual life he lived into this laborious, pure, and common, lovely life. The old man who had been sitting with him had long since gone home. The peasants had all dispersed. Those who lived nearby had gone home. Those from far away had gathered to have supper and spend the night in the meadow. Levine, unnoticed by the peasants, went on lying on the haystack, watching, listening, and thinking. The peasants who were staying overnight in the meadow spent almost the whole short summer night without sleeping. First there was general, merry talk, and loud laughter over supper. Then again, songs and laughter. The long, laborious day had left no other trace in them than merriment. Before dawn everything quieted down. Only the night sounds of the never-silent frogs in the swamp and the horses snorting in the morning mist rising over the meadow could be heard. Coming to his senses, Levine got down off the haystack, looked at the stars, and realized that night was over. "Well, what am I to do then? How am I to do it?" he said to himself, trying to put into words all that he had thought and felt during that short night. All those thoughts and feelings were divided into 3 separate lines of argument. One was to renounce his old life, his useless knowledge, his utterly needless education. This renunciation gave him pleasure and was easy and simple for him. Other thoughts and notions concerned the life he wished to live now. The simplicity, the purity, the legitimacy of this life he felt clearly, and he was convinced that he would find in it that satisfaction, repose, and dignity, the absence of which he felt so painfully. But the third line of argument turned around the question of how to make this transition from the old life to the new, and here nothing clear presented itself to him. To have a wife, to have work, and the necessity to work, to leave Pokrovska, to buy land, to join a community, to marry a peasant woman. How am I to do it? He asked himself, and found no answer. However, I didn't sleep all night, and can't give myself a clear accounting, he told himself. I'll clear it up later. One thing is sure, that this night has decided my fate. All my former dreams about family life are nonsense, not the right thing, he said to himself. All this is much simpler and better. How beautiful, he thought, looking at the strange mother-of-pearl shell of white, fleecy clouds that stopped right over his head in the middle of the sky. How lovely everything is on this lovely night. And when did that shell have time to form? A moment ago I looked at the sky, and there was nothing there, only 2 white strips. Yes, and in that same imperceptible way my views of life also changed. He left the meadow and walked down the main road to the village. A slight breeze sprang up, and it turned gray, gloomy. The bleak moment came that usually precedes dawn, the full victory of light over darkness. Hunched up with cold, Levine walked quickly, his eyes on the ground. What's that? Someone's coming, he thought, hearing bells, and he raised his head. 40 paces away from him, on the grassy main road down which he was walking, a coach and 4 with leather trunks on its roof came driving towards him. The shaft horses pressed towards the box, guided the shafts along the ruts so that the wheels ran over the smooth ground. It was the only thing Levine noticed, and without thinking who it might be, he glanced absent-mindedly into the coach. Inside the coach, an old lady dozed in the corner, and a young girl, apparently just awakened, sat by the window holding the ribbons of her white bonnet with both hands, bright and thoughtful, all filled with a grace and complex inner life to which Levine was a stranger. She looked through him at the glowing sunrise. At the very instant when this vision was about to vanish, the truthful eyes looked at him. She recognized him, and astonished joy lit up her face. He could not have been mistaken. There were no other eyes in the world like those. There was no other being in the world capable of concentrating for him all the light and meaning of life. It was she. It was Kitty. He realized that she was driving to Yergoshevo from the railway station. And all that had troubled Levine during that sleepless night, all the decisions he had taken, all of it, suddenly vanished. He recalled with disgust his dreams of marrying a peasant woman. There, in that carriage, moving quickly away and bearing to the other side of the road, was the only possibility of resolving the riddle of his life that had been weighing on him so painfully of late. She did not look out again. The noise of the springs could no longer be heard. The bells were barely audible. The barking of dogs indicated that the coach had entered the village, and around there remained the empty fields, the village ahead, and he himself, solitary and a stranger to everything, walking alone down the deserted main road. He looked at the sky, hoping to find there the shell he had admired, which had embodied for him the whole train of thoughts and feelings of the past night. There was no longer anything resembling a shell in the sky. There, in the inaccessible heights, a mysterious change had been accomplished. No trace of the shell was left, but spread over half the sky was a smooth carpet of ever-diminishing, fleecy clouds. The sky had turned blue and radiant, and with the same tenderness, yet also with the same inaccessibility, it returned his questioning look. No, he said to himself. However good that life of simplicity and liberty be, I cannot go back to it. I love her. If you enjoy this format, please leave a like and subscribe and return tomorrow for the next chapter.